Disaster that cost American lives. An untold story you will hear tonight.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
U.S. military investigators are at work this week on a tiny speck of land 20 miles off the coast of Cambodia. They hope to resolve a lingering mystery, the fate of 3 U.S. Marines lost in combat on Koh Tang Island a quarter of a century ago. As CBS's Vince Gonzalez reports, a little noted military blunder made them forgotten heroes.
Thank you for calling.
The graveyard shift can be lonely, but Gail Hargrove has had 25 years of practice being alone.
And then this is the day we got married.
How old were you there?
I was 18, he was 23.
33 days later, she said goodbye to her new husband, Corporal Joseph Hargrove, as he shipped out for the Far East.
The landing zone was the
2 months later, in April 1975, the war in Vietnam ended. As Americans fled Saigon, Joseph Hargrove was thousands of miles away on a Marine base in Japan, writing love letters.
I love thinking of you. There's nothing I'd rather do. And when this year is up, my love, I am coming back to you.
But he never came back.
U.S. officials said the attack was ordered.
Just 2 weeks after the humiliating defeat in Vietnam, Cambodia seized an American merchant ship, the SS Mayaguez. U.S. intelligence said the crew was taken to the island of Koh Tang.
There are limits beyond which the United States cannot be pushed.
Corporal Hargrove was part of a rescue mission ordered by President Ford. It was hailed as a success.
The entire crew has been rescued.
But according to military documents and films obtained by CBS News and interviews with veterans of the Mayaguez incident, the operation was an intelligence disaster that needlessly cost American lives.
Enters your mind probably several times a day, and it will till the day you die.
Jim Davis and other Marine officers were told to expect a few dozen lightly armed pirates on Koh Tang Island. Instead, hundreds of heavily armed Cambodians were waiting.
Having been in Vietnam, I'll be honest with you, what went through my head was, oh Lord, here we go again.
We're coming, man, we're coming. Most of the rescue mission's helicopters were severely damaged, 3 blown out of the sky. Incredibly, intelligence reports prepared 2 days before the assault accurately estimated as many as 300 heavily armed Cambodian soldiers on the island. But the Marines never saw those reports. And the Mayaguez crew wasn't even on Koh Tang Island. The men had been released at a different location before the Marines landed. The final toll, 15 dead, 50 wounded, and 3 missing, including Joseph Hargrove.
You know, a few good men can't do their job if you don't give them a few good facts.
Still wears very heavy on your mind of those that did not make it out, and especially the missing. Yes, that part was a disaster.
It was a bad day, a real bad day.
The widow and the officer recently met at the funeral of another casualty of the Mayaguez incident, and they discovered they are bound together not only by sorrow, but by a fear. Fear that the 3 missing Marines were left behind alive. More on that tomorrow. Vince Gonzalez, CBS News, Arlington National Cemetery.
Lest we forget, and that's part of our world tonight. The ringleader of the Texas Killer 7 admits he is a cop killer. And later, U.S. Marines, abandoned and left behind on the battlefield, now forgotten heroes. As CBS reported last night, a U.S. military recovery team is now in Southeast Asia seeking the remains of U.S. Marines killed 25 years ago on a tiny island off Cambodia. The young Marines were on what began as a rescue mission, but faulty intelligence turned it into a bloodbath. Vince Gonzalez has part 2 of his investigative report on the forgotten heroes of Koh Tang Island.
They are the last names on the Vietnam War Memorial. 15 men who died in a battle waged weeks after the war had ended. Killed on the beaches of Koh Tang during an attempt to rescue the crew of a captured American merchant ship, the SS Mayaguez. Remains are still being recovered on this Cambodian island and returned home for a proper burial. But nothing can put to rest the fear that 3 Marines who didn't make it out alive may have been alive when the last U.S. helicopter took off from Koh Tang Island.
That's the worst possible scenario I could think of.
Jim Davis was the last officer on the island. In these battlefield radio tapes obtained by CBS News, Davis can be heard as U.S. forces pulled out under heavy fire.
What can you do for us, over? We're coming, man. We're coming. How many people are you going to have left? I just don't know. It's dark out here, and I don't know who's going and who's here. I'm going to just have to do the best I can.
A short time later, Davis got all his men out, and he'd been assured other units were off the island.
Captain Davis advises that all Marines are off the island. Okay, outstanding. That's exactly what we're looking for.
But he wasn't told 3 Marines from another unit were missing: Gary Hall, Danny Marshall, and Joseph Hargrove. Davis volunteered to go back. Request denied.
If there would have been any inkling that they were still alive, we would have returned. There would have been no doubt.
Even though the Pentagon concluded the Marines were killed in action, CBS News has learned that right after the battle, military investigators talked to 4 Marines who saw one of the men alive on the beach just 10 minutes before the last helicopter took off.
You taking ground fire, or are you putting down some
And from the crew of that helicopter, more evidence men were left behind alive.
Some of the Marines on board said there are still Marines on the island at this time.
And since the 1980s, the military has collected numerous reports from Cambodians describing Marines who survived for days or weeks before being captured, executed, and buried. Some described 3 Americans killed in a firefight.
I was the last commander on the island. So regardless of who those Marines belonged to, I still share the guilt of those missing Marines. Think about it every night.
So does Gail Hargrove, who lost her husband, Joseph.
You know, you think, well, hopefully he's alive. And then I just decided the best thing to do was pray him to heaven.
She'd been married to him for only 33 days before he was sent into battle. She's been grieving for 25 years.
Everything you want is right there. And then all of a sudden you open your eyes and boom, just like a snap of a finger, everything you got's taken away.
Recently, the widow and the officer met for the first time as the remains of an Air Force pilot, another casualty of the Mayaguez incident, were buried.
We are very glad to welcome Lieutenant Richard Vandegeer home at last.
After the ceremony, Gail Hargrove had comforting words for Jim Davis.
And if you're losing any sleep over my husband, don't, because he's in heaven.
They have a special bond, the agony felt by those who carry the memory of men whose fate is unknown. Vince Gonzalez, CBS News, Arlington National Cemetery.